coming up on the Lead Ministry Podcast.
And the problem with that is that if you get there and you don't actually realize that you never actually complete anything, is that you just get stuck in this mode of being like settling for that type of ministry, right?
Yeah, okay.
And I think the learning culture is something that helps us break through and go beyond just efficient ministry.
And now your host, Josh Denhart.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Lead Ministry Podcast. We're grateful that you're here. Happy New Year. Happy kickoff to 2025. We're grateful that you're here. We do have a lot of fun doing this. And so we're going to talk today about being a learner and creating and developing a culture of learning in your church. Well, Bill, super grateful that you're here. How are things going for you, buddy?
So well, it's podcast day, so that's always fun.
Those are fun. It's fun. And it is fun for us to hang out and talk like this. Well, listen, we're talking about being learners. And I got to say, that's one thing that I enjoy about our friendship is that we are always learning, pushing each other, challenging the status quo, and dialoguing. And I actually get sharper and better as a result of us talking.
Yeah, it's definitely like a kind of a value you can develop being a learner. It's, I think a lot of times when I was growing up, I was not the most interested in school. Let's put it that way. And I remember when I was like, in grade school, even in high school, I'm like, when these 12 school years are done, I am not doing any of this anymore. Like, this is so pointless to me. And what really changed it for me was going to Bible school and I found my passion, right? Like, I found what God had called me to be and do. And that's when
that changed everything. Yeah.
It changed everything. And I adopted, I actually just want to learn my whole life about all of the things.
It's very interesting to me. Well, first of all, I have to make a joke. You know that I'm a classically trained educator, right? Bachelor's in chemistry education, master's in effective instruction, went on to become national board certified in young adult adolescent science. So classically trained as an educator. In the PC way to summarize who you were in high school or whatever is what I called a reluctant learner.
That's exactly it. Literally every parent-teacher conference my parents ever went to, it was, Bill's pretty bright, but he just doesn't like school.
So I would say, Bill is kind of, pause for effect, a reluctant learner.
It's so nice. That's so nice.
Yeah. But the funny thing is that often, as a classically trained educator, I often sometimes question even the way we do education. Because it doesn't. I just dropped my son off at school and he was like, he had a hard time getting up yesterday. He had a hard time getting up today. And we're doing a small remodeling thing in the boys' rooms. And so they had to move downstairs. Well, of course, he was complaining that his sister left all the lights on last night, which, by the way, is her great, the thing that we can't stand about her is...
I think every family has a kid who does that.
And we've banned her from having candles in the home. She's like 17 and she's like, I kind of want to have a candle. Yep. And the third time that we found a burning candle and you're not home, you're done. So we're not talking just light switches. We're talking lights from the 1800s here. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So he was complaining this morning about her leaving lights on because he's sleeping down in the main level. But then he said, I just don't want to go to school. I have no desire. There's nothing that's drawing me here except for a couple of friendships. And so I'm the same way. I didn't really get into learning until later. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my word, it felt good to do good. Yes. It felt good to become a learner. And the funny thing is that when I started to have a staff team at church, my excitement about learning and my excitement about their learning was like wildfire. And it caught. And all of us were just super hungry to get better, right?
Yeah, like that whole value and culture of learning it can be contagious.
That's what I'm saying. It became
Yes.
contagious. And and by the way, the people that I had on my team were super great people. And by the way, we all ended up becoming, and I'm not joking about this, kind of a superstar team at our church. We became the team that everybody wanted to be. We became the team that everybody kind of wanted to model and emulate. Other teams who were the leaders of those teams were older than me. They had more experience than me. They'd been to seminary and I hadn't. At the end, all of them were coming to me saying, hey, how do you have such a healthy team and you guys get so much accomplished? Okay, great. So we ended up getting there. But hear me out real quick. Dude, I wasn't the poster child for I should be on staff, right? I didn't have any background in this. I just happened to love God, love the Bible, and was kind of a go-getter. And then the team that was around me, we were a bunch of neophytes, right? We didn't know what we were doing. But hear me out. You don't go to war with the army that you want. You go to war with the army that you got.
Yep.
That's right. Go to war with who you got, not who you think you'd have. So in other words, we all got into this not really knowing that much, but then we self-educated through a culture of learning and we became really, really, really sharp at a whole bunch of things.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think what's cool about that is in order for that to happen, it took you being intentional about being a learner, right?
Yep. It sure did. I had to be the first. I had to go first.
Right. And I think that's leadership, right? And I think what I wanted to kind of talk about in this episode was, I think we can get to the point where, let's say we're in ministry and we jump on with lead ministry and do the courses and you get everything set the way that we talk about all the time, which is systematizing your ministry. And you get things running, you're an efficient machine, and you just get to this point where your ministry's humming, right? Sometimes people think that is the end goal.
Right.
Like I just got my ministry to the point where everything is working. It's not that there's never any problems, but we've actually have contingencies for those problems.
Yes.
And we have a strong staff team and things are healthy and everything's going great. And we think, hey, I just won ministry. If it was a game, I won, checkmate, done, right?
Yes.
And the problem with that is that if you get there and you don't actually realize that you never actually complete anything, is that you just get stuck in this mode of being like settling for that type of ministry, right?
Yeah, okay.
And I think the learning culture is something that helps us break through and go beyond just efficient ministry.
Okay, big time. I want to say that my mind is percolating right now. The interesting thing is that efficiency is good, but efficiency opens up what we're really called to do.
Yes.
And so like all of the systems, by the way, I can't be an effective pastor on a Sunday morning when I am like both eyes and head down trying to fix some check-in computer. Can't be a good pastor at that point.
Absolutely.
I'm not pastoring. I am troubleshooting a stupid computer and I'm literally breaking out in hives because I'm so angry, you know what I mean, or whatever. So I can't be a good pastor when I'm fixing that. However, watch this. I am a good leader, stick with me, when I create a laminated card that sits right by the computer that any dummy can troubleshoot this and solve that problem and I don't have to be there. Now hear me out. That's a great thing. And somebody might go, wow, not only do I have a system for the check-in computers, I have a system for when volunteers cancel on Saturday night. Oh, I got that solved. And so there's these processes and there's almost like these mechanical arms that are keeping the plates spinning. And like you're saying, we could look at that and go, oh, like I literally just won. No, what you did is you set yourself up for the greatest possible future win. The win isn't the plate spinning. The win is the margin that I have to love people and to get into their lives. When I am not face down trying to fix a check-in printer on a Sunday morning. Guess what? I notice a family who is walking a little slower. She looks a little bit more disheveled. And the Spirit kind of percolates in me and bubbles up in me. And it's like, hey, go be a friend. And so then I help her get checked in rather than messing with the machine. I help her get her kids. And then she tears up afterwards and says, here's what's going on in my life. Okay, the systems have now afforded me the ability to be a pastor.
Right. And that vision for that is so important to keep in mind. Because sometimes
Bingo.
when we're in the thick of things, like systematizing our ministry, we're like, if I could just get it to this point, then I'm done, right? And the answer is no, like these things are freeing you up to be the minister that God has called you to be in those moments.
Bingo.
And so like it applies to relationships, like you just said, and you ministering to people, but it also applies to you adding like growth into your life. When you free yourself up with the systems and the things that you have in place, now your spirit is also free in order to go to that next level with who you are as a minister, who you are as a follower of Jesus.
Right. I'll say this. I think there are thousands of leaders across the country who are thinking in their minds, if I could only get the chaos under control, then what? Well, I get it. And by the way, that's why I created Lead Ministry in the first place. Initially, Lead Volunteers, because everybody that I knew was dying under the weight of volunteer management. Well,
yes.
Once you get that system in place, the question now is this beautiful question of, now what?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
that is not the end. The end isn't systems. That's the stair step that you take in order to get to the plateau of really doing what you were called to do. Because otherwise, like I felt early on, and I only wished that I wasn't just on YouTube right now, but actually had a full stage or something like that, so I could manically show myself running to one end and almost falling down to pretend like I was fixing something and then running over here and trying to. So it was like this. If it was a cartoon, it would be, where Tom and Jerry and Tom was his body was like head over here, and head over here is like in thirds, and his body is being stretched and split. That's the majority of people's lives. And they don't end up getting to love somebody, care for people, listen, set up discipleship processes. And so, so the reason that I created it was to go, hey, guess what? It doesn't have to be that way. But I still think the dream needs to be reintroduced, which is what you're talking about today. Because the dream is, by the way, it's pretty dreamy to dream about having a systematized ministry. That's great. That's dreamy, because otherwise you're going to hedge toward burnout. Your family's going to hate you and resent the ministry. So getting those things solved is very critical. But the beauty, and all of a sudden, when you clear the clutter and the road is clear, then you have this gorgeous vista of doing ministry, not doing efficiencies. Yeah.
I love that. That's a great vision. I think that encapsulates like why for Lead Ministry really well. So the question is then, and here's my question for you. So you said that you had this, I guess, focus on learning in your team, and it brought your team to the next level. What does that look like in our churches to have a culture of learning?
Well, I think that it starts with you and it starts with me if we happen to be leading a team. Bottom line, we are going to set the tone for it all. If you're a sarcastic joker and you're kind of a little bit of a sarcastic, backhand things and backhand people, figuratively speaking, your team is going to follow and they're going to go, oh, that's what we do here. We're sarcastic backslappers, or, backhanders. I've watched that happen. The leader sets the tone. By the way, I'm not a fan of sarcasm at all. I think it's a very, very, very negative attempt at humor. Set that aside. So I have to be cautious about my good friend Vance Martin, genius, absolutely great guy. He says this: there's a difference between the thermostat and the temperature. We can set the thermostat, but what's the temperature in the room? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I sought to set up a culture of learning. It did start with me. But what we did and how we set up that culture was every single week, and this is a part of the next course that's coming out called Lead Meetings. And we had a baked in framework, 4 different things. The first one was P, pray. So we prayed together. This is like an agenda. You pour in your stuff into this agenda. Meeting agenda number 1 is pray. We spent time praying. P, personal. We had times that we discussed our personal lives. And sometimes it was goofy stuff like, hey, have you ever thrown up in an inappropriate, like non-cool place? And so we,
that's fun.
Laughter makes a team. The next one was prepare. I'll come back to that one. And the last one was P, plan. Now, plan is like, what's coming up this week? What's coming up next week? What calendar pressing items? But that third P, prepare, was non-urgent but important things. Not urgent. If we never did this, the gears would keep grinding and keep doing their thing, and we'd add a little oil here and a little oil there, and we would plan, everything would be fine. But what I wanted to do was do the super important but not urgent things. And here's a great one. I had a little, a Word document that had like 280 different mini topics, like micro topics. And I was like, oh, wow, what should we plug in to the prepare section this time? And my goal, Bill, was to teach my team the totality of the pastorate, every single aspect. How would you lead communion? What is communion? How do you stand up and nail 3 minutes and not look like a doof? Listen to me.
Right.
I knew that my administrative assistant, Valerie, was never going to be leading communion at our church. She just she wasn't going to do it. But the concept and the understanding behind how to land 3 minutes, that's an invaluable life lesson.
Right.
Okay, better one. Here's a better one. How to counsel someone who's going through infertility. Now, if somebody in our ministry was going through infertility, they would either gone to Linton, the care and counseling pastor, or they would have come to me. However, we had 7 people on our team. And I just think that the body of Christ is going to be better if every one of us knows some key scriptures to go to, some things never to say, some things always to say as it relates to infertility. It's a thing that exists in our community. Here's another one. How to deal with somebody who just went through a miscarriage. Okay. Again, maybe it's going to go directly to me and directly to Linton. And I think that a non-learner culture would say, hey, that's proprietary knowledge. We're going to super specialize. We need you to understand spreadsheets and the budget, Valerie. But this big boy stuff, that'll be for us. No, this is for everybody because the body of Christ needs to be globally educated about everything. And so I took serious amount of time and serious pains to teach our people everything. Okay, watch this. How to bring about change and not lose your job in a church. So that was a topic that we talked about. Okay. How to deal with an angry parent who thinks their kid was slighted today and they've got fire in their eyes, vinegar in their veins, and they're going to look to kill somebody. Okay. Valerie only comes in Monday to Friday. She's in the office. She's never in charge on a Sunday. Why does she need to know that? I think that that's a great life skill. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So you basically, automatically, week after week, were like trickling in these equipping pieces for your people.
I was systematically trickling in equipping pieces for our people. That is exactly what I was doing. And by the way, I had a fantastic staff retention. We had people that were with us for 7 years, for 10 years, right? And so here's where it really became special, Bill, is that after some of these people had been here a long time, we would be talking about something, or there'd be a complex issue or a personality that was kind of like, wow, that's what's going on there. And then one of the other teammates would say, hey, you know what? That sounds like the normal, rational people concept. And I'm like, they're getting it. So they would grab onto concepts that we talked about 2 years ago and like teach the group or represent the idea. This is what we're talking about. So it started to to go, I mean, not really viral, but it started to saturate all of us. And the funny thing is that different people came. Now I'm going to say that this next thing I'm going to say, it's going to sound like it's very self-aggrandizing and self-adulating, but I think that it's important to point this out. And I have goosebumps right now because this was an extremely special moment. I had my number one, her name was Amy, and we were all talking or planning whether or not we were going to go to a national conference. And Amy said, "Hey, I don't think that I want to go." And I was like, "Wow, that's surprising." And she goes, "Listen, I love the time that we get when we're traveling. It's beautiful. It's gold." But she said, "I don't want to go sit in a bunch of breakouts." And I said, "Well, tell me more about that." Okay, this is the part that's going to sound self-aggrandizing. She said, "Josh, we have you." She goes, we're getting national quality breakouts every single week in our little micro 8-person staff meeting. She goes, "There's it's a gamble that if I go to that breakout, whether that person is even really that great of a communicator and has any idea." She goes, we're getting like the caviar and the high quality champagne, so to speak. We're getting the goods every single week. That was a huge blessing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Actually, that she said that. I've actually had her experience like going to national conferences before. Like I go and then I sit in these breakout sessions and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is stuff that I learned in like the first 5 years of ministry sometimes,
Right.
and like, yeah, it's for a certain level of people. But if you've been trained by Josh Denhart every single week, you're not going to find as much value out of it because you were intentional with that.
Oh, dude, I was obscenely intentional. And I got to be honest with you. Like, this is like the cat out of the bag, the truth be told, like you're going to this is basically like the gambit is up. Here it is. Mm-hmm. Everything that I taught my people for those 10 years on staff, all I did was codify it, put myself in front of a video and make courses about the exact same things that I taught all of my people.
Yeah. So that's a great point. So like, if you're listening and you're like, I wish I could have been on Josh's staff for that time period. Guess what?
You can be. It's really true. Awesome. And I remember, man, I'm having a moment. I'll tell you what. I remember sitting in my office with this list of like 280 different little nuggets that I wanted to make sure I communicated and cycled them through, right? And it was so homespun. And it was like I had this whole thing and then I would boldface the ones that I'd covered. You know what I mean? Yep. And I was like, okay, what hasn't been covered? Great. And then all of a sudden I sat there and I thought, man, I would love to systematize and teach everybody all of this. And you know those moments where you look back, or maybe it's like a meme or something that says, hey, what you dreamed about, you're actually living right now. Be thankful. You know what I mean? That's kind of the moment that I'm having because I wanted to like have all of this learning in a very cogent, thought through and transferable way. And behold, it's done.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm just thinking about the person listening and they're in ministry.
Yeah.
And they're thinking about this and they're going, how do I do this for myself? And I think the question you have to start asking is take account of where you are right now. What are you transmitting to your leaders? Are you actually teaching them? Are you moving them along, or are you just doing more of the processes, right? So you like create a space essentially for your team to do that. And then the other piece is like, if I'm listening, what I say is like, maybe you're like, I'm not there yet to be an expert to teach all these things. Well, here's the thing, like go through lead ministry. And as you learn what you're learning in the course, that is your course material for your people. Transmit it to them. And you'll learn even more because you have to learn it to a level that you can communicate it to somebody else.
100%. So in my educational sequencing, the distance between your brain and your mouth that's the most critical piece, because if you can't articulate it, you don't yet know it.
Right.
Just because you've heard it does not mean that you understand it to the point that you can articulate it to somebody else. If you can teach it, and you have to like what's called synthesis. If you can go through the process of synthesizing this material and packaging it back up and sending it out your very own mouth with your very own verbiage, friend, you now know this stuff. That's Absolutely. A whole level. So what you're saying is, hey, and by the way, I tell this to people all the time. And by the way, back in the day, I would tell my number one, Amy, because at some point I said to Amy, hey, Amy, guess what? She said, what? She was excited. And I said, you know how I have you and Andy and Beth as my like key people? She said, yeah. And I said, it's now time for you to find 3 people. And she goes, her face totally changed. She's like, I don't want to do that. She goes, I just want you to keep doing this for me. And I said, oh yeah, I totally get that. But I want to let you know, Amy, by the way, Amy, have I ever told you that you have to do anything it was at this point, it was like, 6 years that we were in ministry together. And she goes, no. I said, so I've never told you, I've never pulled the boss card ever. I never did, ever. Mm-hmm. Right? And she says, no, never. And I said, I want to let you know that in love, there is no other option. This is the kingdom. And I'm telling you, you have to do this. And I'll help you, but you have to find 3 people. And she clammed up so hard and she said, well, what in the world am I supposed to say to them? And I said, Amy, listen, this was a moment, right? It's 2 Timothy 2:2. Second, that's 2, Timothy 2:2. So this is 2:2:2. And I said, Amy, the things that you've heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, find people to share them with who will be able to share them with others. And I said, yes. So essentially, if you literally just heard me share about normal, rational people become completely irrational when it comes to their kids, all I want you to do is to go, okay, he just said it. Now just say that. Just
yes.
I said, here, by the way, Amy, here is the meeting agenda that I just led with you. Mm-hmm. I'll send it to you, and you put in new prayer items, and you put in new dates for the stuff that you're in charge of, and reuse it. Right? Mm-hmm. And so then I forced her to start to pour into another. And guess what? Her life exploded in terms of being a learner.
Yeah.
So that's like in the same way, get lead ministry, listen to it and go, okay. And by the way, here's another thing I tell people. I'm like, don't tell people, well, Josh Denhart said this. No, own it. Own it. Like, you be the expert. You be the person where they're like, dang, Connie is smart. Yeah, I don't care. Who cares? Don't say that don't say that you learned this from lead ministry. Just own it. And then they're going to follow you even more, Well, yeah. And by the way, why this is so powerful and why it works, I think is because it is like doing this in ministry is actually a parallel track to who you are supposed to be as a disciple of Jesus. Bingo. Take it away.
Right? Yeah. I mean, Jesus, right, he tells us to go and make disciples and teach people to obey everything that he commanded. So that means that the disciples had to learn what Jesus said, remember what Jesus said, and transmit it to somebody else and bring other people along. And so when you do that in ministry, you're actually just discipling. You're just
obeying the Great Commission.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's fun. It feels so good. And then watch this. The interesting thing, we'll end on this. When we focused, and by the way, if you've ever read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, this is the concept of quadrant 2, right? He's got the 4 quadrants, and this is important but not urgent. And quadrant 1 is important and urgent. Like, you got to get it done, and there's a super deadline. And if you live in quadrant 1, you're heading towards burnout. It's just the facts, because you can't keep up. Great. But the more time you spend in quadrant 2, which is learning important but not urgent things, the less time you have to spend in number 1. Stick with me. So the more time that I spent teaching our people how to do conflict resolution, how to recruit volunteers, how to really like go out to lunch with somebody and continue to ask this one question: what is God doing in your life? Can you tell me more about that? Interesting. What else is God doing in your life? Can you tell me more about that? That skill of learning how to ask follow-up questions. I taught that to my people, right? And get this, because I taught them those things, we had fewer cleanup on aisle 9 issues. Right? All of a sudden, if you're a bozo and you handle an angry mom in the wrong way, son, you've now just screwed up the first 3 days of my week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because you didn't know how to handle an angry parent. I'm now there in my office. Okay.
Right.
So by me slowing everything down and teaching you how to deal with an angry parent, I just saved myself Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday heartache and like vitriol and stomach, whatever, like Tums,
Right. Yeah, that's genius. That's genius. You can avoid so many issues.
That's it. And so I got to be honest with you, that was part of my initial motivation, was to go, if I just teach everybody how to be a good pastor, then we're not going to have freakouts and problems and have cleanup on aisle 9. We just have an angry parent who was ticked off because their family didn't get to eat at our event because you didn't follow principle number 2 as it relates to pulling off an event. And they're like, oh, yes. So can I educate you about this? They're like, yeah, I never want to have an angry episode. Okay. So now a need to know has turned into a need to grow.
Yeah, I love that.
And so we spent a lot of time in quadrant 2. And at first it was preventative. Okay, I get that. And it was very utilitarian, Bill. But before long, it became like way more intrinsic. We're like, man, this just feels good to learn and do good. Let's be that. Let's absolutely be the best. And then that took over and spiraled out of control. You know what I mean? And we did it for 10 years. It was great.
I love that. Yeah. And I think the other thing that I didn't realize early on in ministry, which I now realize, is you never know who you're equipping and what you're equipping them for in the future.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Let's do this. I kind of want to do a part 2. Can we do a part 2 for this one?
Absolutely.
Because we just don't know. So there's the teaser, right? Cliffhanger. But there are times you just don't know who somebody is going to be in the future. Well, gang, listen, this is great. I'm super grateful. Thank you, Bill. This has been a great episode. We're going to pick it up right after this. We're going to take part 2, which is one of the key factors in pouring into people is that you're building the kingdom.
Amen.
Amen. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Lead Ministry Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and visit leadvolunteers.com for more episodes and resources. Thanks for listening.